practice on your big 8-foot board and practice pumping on flat water when there's no conditions. That's completely different.
That's definitely what I've found as well, is with how hard sup downwind being. A lot of the guys are focusing on just paddling up because they want to get on foil, which is definitely the skill that you have to learn.
Yeah.
But because it's so hard in each session, they might only get on foil once or twice. The actual foil time is so minimal. So then it takes them so long to get good, because to get to that actual foiling stage where you then can clue into kind of reading the bumps and what lines to take, what patterns to read, it's you don't get that chance again because paddling up is so hard. But on the foil drive, you're just like zip, straight back up again. Got a chance to do this, and then you might come down, bang, another chance to get up again. So it's shortcutting a hard process. Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's across the board with many different disciplines too. You can just shortcut or make life easier in so many different ways. And we're discussing earlier about like winging, and we never thought that anyone would ever want to use a motor for winging. There's some guys using them light wind winging so they don't have to have such a big wing or such a big board or foil or whatever, and makes more conditions more accessible. But for me personally, I got into this from a surf foil background, not a wind sport background. When I was learning to wing, there was no way I was going out in the middle of the ocean with no motor or no way to get back, because I don't know how to use this big floppy piece of fabric in my face, and it's going around everywhere. I don't have that understanding. At worst, I lie on the board, I flag the wing, and I motor back to shore, and I don't have to walk down the beach or get dragged out to sea. So for me, it was more of a comfort level. Like, sure, I had the access to the gear, so I just left it on there, but it did still short track or fast track my learning process, because mentally in my head, I knew I had a backup plan. That if I can't get on full, or I fall and I pop the wing or anything like that, I at least can come back in.
That's always that secondary like plan of action. What's your plan B is always like so comforting in the back of your mind, right? Like what's something we try to teach in our lesson program, or like Josh, I'd imagine like foil drive for you would be in a downwind shooter. Like you're gonna go have a really sketchy run where if things don't go as planned,
then actually have to pull me up.
It might be nice to have that second plan of action, and maybe open up a new run that normally you'd be like, I don't think it's
because the wind direction's not right or something. Totally. No, I kind of took that a little bit too far, and Ben pulled me up on it, because I was nearly motoring out to bloody New Zealand to get the right line to come in on this certain direction wind, and he was like, oh, we've got an amazing product, but things can break or fail, and you don't want to motor like 10 miles out to sea and then go, all right, I got a good line now, I'm just going to come back, because you don't want something to break 10 miles out to sea and then you're on a board this big by yourself with no phone or something. So I feel like you got to be smart about it, and not take advantage too much of what the product can do, because
but that's across the board with everything.
It
can be a foil failure, any part of your hardware, whether it's the motor, battery system, or the foil or board,
or the conditions deteriorate.
The conditions, or yourself as well. You come off and you crash, or you tweak your neck in trying to paddle up, or your back and you can't put the power down, or you just hurt yourself in some way. You're a long way offshore a lot of the time, especially for downwinding and even winging.
And like the craziest other thing that I've found with the foil drive is that, I don't know if you get this when you go kiting or any of the wind sports, you're always worried about if the wind's going to drop out. So like you're putting together your gear, and you're like, should I ride that wing, or should I size up that wing? With the foil drive, it kind of takes that out, because you're like, oh, if I can't get going, I'm just going to motor up. And like, it might not be the most efficient, best foil for that, but I'm still going to be on foil. So it's it does take that anxiety level out of it a whole lot, especially when you're in the beginning phase, where that anxiety might be enough to be like, I'm not going today, because like it's too risky. So it's like with anything, like you got to get that experience up, and the foil drive lets you get out there on more days, guaranteed, for sure.
And as we said, it's more time on foil equals more practice. You can't learn a skill or get better at something without actually physically doing it and doing a lot of it. That's kind of the whole point of foil drive, is just let's have some assistance to do the really, really hard bit so that we can enjoy the really, really fun bit.
For sure.
more often
Yeah.
and get better at it.
On that note, we have a question here. It goes kind of right in line with our safety discussion here.
Keep sending them through, guys.
Yeah, bring them on, guys.
Get us.
All the questions.
I'm going to regret that in a minute.
Solo Pelican says, can you please describe the on-off functions for safety when you fall and remount? How easy is it to disable the propeller and then get on going after safe board remount, which I think your new update, right, with the locking trigger mechanism, is kind of the ideal solution to that.
For sure. So some of the basics. The controller has a power button on it that when the controller is turned off, even if all your battery and everything is all plugged in and powered on your board, if the controller is turned off and you bump the trigger, nothing happens. So that's always our startup procedure, if you like, or best practice with the gear is to plug everything in on the beach, turn the controller on, test the motor's working, test everything's running, and then turn the controller straight back off. Because then you can pull the trigger as much as you want, especially with like winging and supping. You've got a lot of gear to carry on the beach. There's a foil that's this big awkward shape with, it's hard to carry. Supboards being bigger as well, and big foils, big wings, big mast, all that. And then if you add a paddle in and a wing, the likelihood of bumping the trigger, while you're walking down to the water and trying to get in the water, there is a risk there. So having the controller off is 100% the easiest, safest way to make sure that the motor's not going to do anything while the trigger's turned off. Keep in mind, propellers, like many other things in the world, like foils and foil tips, are sharp too. They are still a relatively I'm not going to say dangerous, but they are just a sharp object. It's like a chainsaw without its guard on, or
you got to be aware of it so you don't
exactly.
Punch it.
Exactly. So still be very cautious of the motor at any time, like most things. But with the controller turned off, it's not going to bump the trigger and run. So that's the one thing. Specifically to his question about jumping in and out of the water and turning the motor off, and when you fall and things like that, there's a few other things. So with the wireless link between the controller and the actual electronics box, water is something that blocks signal very, very well. Hence, some technique things that we've been talking about recently with using really small boards. But as soon as you fall in the water and the controller goes under the water, it loses signal. And then we've programmed into the system that once it loses signal between the controller and the box, to cut the motor off and put it into a fail-safe mode where the motor's not going to run unless you reset the system and off you go again. So what that means in practice is you fall off, the controller goes underwater, the motor will stop with the controller underwater. It's a spring-loaded trigger as well, so you should let go of, when you feel yourself falling, let go of the throttle. And once you fall in the water, if the controller goes underwater, it will stop the motor as well. The motor also has a brake function on it that regardless of whenever you do it, you let go of the trigger, you turn the controller off, the controller goes underwater and you lose signal, the motor will stop and it actually brakes. It doesn't just slowly spin down, it physically stops quite quickly. So you fall off, you're in the water. Again, best practice should be stay away from the board, turn the controller off, then climb back onto the board. Most people, once they get familiar with the system, don't bother with that safety step, but best practice, you should do that.
Yeah, agreed.
Same with, even if you're just going for a quick little sup out in the lake, you really should wear a life jacket, tell somebody where you're going and take a phone. Most people go out for a nice quick little sunset sup down the side of the lake and they don't tell anyone, they don't take anything with them. But it's best practice to obviously do all these things, climb back on the board, get yourself back on there, turn the controller on and you know you're safe.
I also like when I am out in a session, usually I'll give a friend or whoever's out there because they're interested in wanting to have a go.
Give them the run.
I will turn off the remote when I give it to them. So it's their responsibility. When they turn it back on, I'm like, okay, this is live now. Don't make a mistake. It's just, I've seen it also happen where like someone will give a friend the remote, but it's on and they might not know that. They might accidentally squeeze the trigger. It's super important to just communicate.
To think about these.
With people, especially because if you're given the controller to a friend maybe who's only used the foil drive once or twice before, it's not super familiar that like, you got to turn these things off when you're not handling them. Exactly. It's very easy to forget.
For sure. So, especially when you're all stoked and you're in you had a great session, you climb back in, you come back out of the water and you've just forgot to turn it off and you leave it on the beach and then somebody starts asking you questions and then you pull the trigger while you're looking at it. Turn it off.
I definitely, after I finish a session, when I'm coming into the beach, I will turn off the remote before I even flip the board over. Because there's been so many times where I'll flip the board over and I'll be like pushing the board in with my mask, and then I'll see the remote still on. I'm like, oh shit. And your hand is right next to the propeller. Like it's so dangerous. You just got to make a habit of turning that thing off before you even get to the beach. Turn it off on your last wave. You don't need the remote on when you're on the wave.
Exactly, And it's one of those things, I mean, a spinning propeller in I come from a model airplane background. Model airplane motors have been chewing up people's hands since the 60s when the model airplanes was first sort of remote control stuff. Chainsaws, outboard boat motors, like you name it, there's lots and lots of dangerous things in the world, but they're all generally pretty fun things to use.
Just because it's fun doesn't mean that you can run your face into it.
It's
you know,
understanding things. So, and then the bit you touched on with the throttle lock. So again, that was something that we that was over Christmas of this year, so 2024. We introduced a throttle lock feature on the controller, which we're about to publish a bunch more information about as well. But basically that means that when you first turn on the controller, the throttle trigger is still locked. So at the moment, and any kits prior to like 2023 or earlier, as soon as the controller's on, the throttle trigger is live, but the new ones have a lock function that locks the trigger. So even when the controller's on, you need to press and hold the cruise control button on the top for 3 seconds, and it will unlock the trigger, and then you can use the throttle. So that's a new feature for 24 as well. And
it is disableable as well.
Correct.
So if you don't want that,
Yeah.
you're like, hey, I don't need that. I turn my remote off while I'm staging my gear until I'm ready to ride. I turn it off when I'm coming in. And you're that kind of person that's just very,
see a red flag.
Reliable in that. You can do that.
Yeah.
That's not always me. The first time I took it out, I turned on my remote. Made sure it was working, walked in. Make my way through the breakers, and the wave hits the trigger. And not a lot, but just a little, just lurch forward. Like, okay, I learned my lesson here. Leave it off until you're ready to motor.
And the new
coming in, do the same.
New throttle lock also has a feature that you can turn on through the settings as well, that it has a timing function that you can set it anywhere from 1 second to 100 seconds, that if you don't touch the throttle for whatever that predetermined setting that you've made, it will then relock. So you can set it to 10 seconds. So as long as you've used the throttle within the last 10 seconds, it's unlocked. But as soon as you leave it, you get on a wave, you're riding for a minute, the throttle will lock again. Again, that could be seen as very annoying to proficient users, that they've ridden the wave all the way in, and they go to turn off and pull the trigger and it doesn't run. They got to remember to unlock again, which only takes 2 seconds, but it's just another step. Or it could be seen as like if you're in a lesson scenario or with kids or anything like that, they fall off, it's going to take them 10 seconds to come up. Or if it's a student or a child or something like that, you can set it to 2 or 3 seconds, that if they let go of the trigger completely, it will lock straight away again. So we're trying to add all these features that go right from proficient rider all the way down to somebody who's never used the gear, and have a safety feature that works for everyone how they want it. But it really does come down to understanding the system, respect for the system, and just a little bit of self-awareness and just respect for the gear.
Like it is. It's a learning process, right? It's like when you learn to wing. Everybody puts a wing through or foil through their wing at some point, because like they just haven't learned that yet. You know what I mean? You see somebody, the first thing they do when they pick up their new wing gear is pump their thing, they walk down there and they get to the board and they're like,
to it. Which way does all this go?
How do I hold this? So it's the same thing, you just got to get your processes down and
the number of
think
boards,
through it, you know what I mean? Because it can be
the number of foils you see upside down sitting next to a pumped up wing, and then you're in a windy beach and they blow over and go straight into a wing, and you're like, it's beginner easy stuff. It's so easy to avoid, but people just don't think about it. It's exactly the same thing. So
there's plenty of process. There's things in place, but number one, common sense.
It's just
act like it's on all the time.
It's just habits.
Yep.
Exactly.
Get into some other questions here. Let's see. So they love the possibility of the versatility for having different motor links and different purposes. 25 for surf, 60, 70 for e-foiling. Is that feasible to switch between them, or better to set up 2 masts? I think that kind of depends on the person, but if you want to have them ready to plug and play and go, 2 masts is easier, but it is pretty easy to adjust them, especially if you have an aluminum mast. I would say is a positive thing in some cases where you can use the same motor pod. You loosen up the screws,
Slide
you
it
can
up and
slide
down.
it up
Yeah,
and down, of course,
Yeah.
with the right cable length.
Yeah.
Or at least a similar cable length, so you can kind of slack it. But, so yeah, you can definitely do that.
Quick thing on that too, like as you said, it depends on the person, but we have a lot of riders now that basically only use foil drive for certain disciplines. So let's just say when they're surf foiling or they're downwinding, they only ever use the foil drive.
Sure.
But if they go winging, they don't need it or they don't want to use it or whatever else. So there's a lot of people now that are having 2 mast setups and they have a dedicated surf foil drive setup.
And a lot of times you
And
would
then a wing.
anyway, because
Correct.
different size masts for different
Exactly.
disciplines or
Yeah.
different conditions. So.
Specific to the question about switching between like a 25 centimeter motor for surfing and a 60 or 70 for e-foiling, that's where, you know, we brought out those options for the longer cables so that, as always with foil drive, you can retrofit your own gear and you can put the motor right down the bottom and tape the cable all the way up. But if you're going to be doing that frequently, I would highly recommend looking at one of the integrated masts for your e-foil. Having the tape all the way out the side and the cable external, it 100% works for sure, but it's definitely not as clean and nice and definitely not as efficient for e-foiling. So if you're going to have 2, I mean, currently as of right now, there's Axis and then Project Cedrus with all of the different adapters. So if you ride a foil that works with Project Cedrus or Axis, then having an e-foil mast in one of those 2 that has the motor down the bottom, cables all internal, it's 3 screws and 1 plug to undo that mast and put on the other mast. I mean, I'm not trying to sell people more gear and more masts and all that
No,
kind of
I
stuff.
agree. It makes sense.
But it kind of makes sense. An aluminium mast is a relatively cheap investment compared to carbon. Get an alloy mast for e-foiling where you're not going to be loading the mast up that much.
Yeah.
And things, the rigidity and stiffness that you're looking for in a carbon mast when you're surfing or winging or whatever, it's not as important e-foiling.
Yeah.
So you could look at a cheaper mast option and have a dedicated mast just for e-foiling. But 100%, it's still only a matter of once you're proficient with the gear and you've had it a little while, you know, remove the tape.
Yeah, and I
Pull
would
the motor
100% agree.
move the
That's
pod
been
down,
my
do it back up,
suggestion.
do the tape
Yeah,
on
to
there.
anybody is if you're e-foiling, you want an integrated mast.
Yeah,
If you're
definitely
not, you know,
cleans.
it depends on the brand, it depends on the mast, but there's compelling reasons to go with a carbon
For sure.
mast, even if you have to tape this much at the top.
Yep.
The drag that you're adding there is kind of inconsequential as compared to what you're gaining
For sure.
from a sleeker carbon mast,
Yep.
you know, where it's not 19 millimeters wide, it's not this fat a cord, it just tapers down, it's sleek, it's going to be a little bit more efficient. So I think there's compelling reasons to not have an integrated mast too.
For sure.
But again, depends on what you're doing, what you
And
want.
that's why we try to
feel
provide
like, so.
we try to provide options for everyone, and that was the whole reason why foil drive exists, is so that it's modular, it's interchangeable parts, you can use it with your gear, you can get some specialist gear or specific gear, and that's why all these options exist. It's just choose what's best for you, your budget, and what you're really trying to do with it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are e-foiling a lot more often than they're surfing, so then they tailor their funds that they put into their toys more towards the e-foiling,
Right.
and they get the integrated mast or whatever else, or they have a separate mast just set up ready for it. And other people are basically always surfing, but every now and then want to teach their friends or jump on flat water. So
Yeah, the great thing is you can always adapt it. You change your mind,
Exactly.
you change your gear a little bit, and bam.
Yep.
Not like you need to reinvest the whole thing. So that's
Exactly.
awesome.
That's it.
Getting into more techie questions here from Spoiled by the Foil. What's up, my brother from
How
the
are you,
West
man?
Coast? What power settings on Gen 2 is Josh, Ben, and Tucker using? Any pro tips for flat water starts?
It's a good one for you to throw to.
Yeah, this is-
I literally just did a
Above
flat
the
water kind of YouTube episode with James Casey, and what we did is we set the boost mode to low. We just wanted to see how efficient the foil drive Gen 2 unit is with the
Yeah.
whole code foils range.
Mhm.
And
You set the power to low, sorry.
set the power to low.
Still had a little bit of boost on it.
Yeah. Still had a little bit of boost, but low power setting. And just because we're trying to get the most out of our battery and kind of just show how powerful the unit
Yeah.
is.
And set like a flat line too. You were trying to test the
Yeah.
different foils
We're
and
just
say,
making a consistent,
correct, yeah.
test.
It was
But
not just pull the trigger and get up.
Yeah,
Guaranteed on
true.
everything, yeah.
But there's definitely technique with flat water foil driving. What I find is that you want to get that board that you're using, which I think now a lot of people are getting foil drive specific boards, kind of what we're talking about, like mid-length style. So I was using my 5.4 Amos, and you just kind of want to pull the trigger and get that board kind of as much flat to the surface of the water as you can, not kind of plowing up with your nose like that. So kind of get it as flat as you can. So nearly kind of frog leg kick up and like from a bodyboard kind of like start, and then you try to get that board flat and just get it going as fast as you can until you can get to your feet. And then what we were doing is kind of like a slow porpoise pump to try and get that the wing of the foil to engage and get lift. And we were getting foils up in that low power mode close to the 600 square centimeter mark, which I didn't think we were going to be able to do because I've never even thought about foil driving a wing that small before, but it was impressive what the power you can get from the unit. And a little plug to Code Foils, what the Code Foils can do.
But like, to answer the question too, like yourself and Paul Cooper both use low power setting on the foil drive. So
I'm only 77 kilos, so I might be on the lighter end of like foil users, but I'm
you're
trying
generally
to.
On small board. Your Amos is
the board I was using before this foil drive specific board was a 25 liter board that is 4.5, but that's like that was only because it was the only board I could use. I wouldn't recommend using that. Like it can be done, but I'm trying to get the most out of my batteries. I'm using it definitely as like an assist,
just to get up.
An assist to get up. I'll still use it in between pumping for waves to try and give myself a break if I'm redlining. But I won't be like just in between waves, just holding it with the motor in the water. That way I'm able to enjoy, over an hour sessions on one battery, which is, I would never have thought like that.
You did 2 downwind runs with us in Adelaide, 2 14-kilometer, whatever that is in miles, downwind runs with us on one slim performance battery, and he still came in with 40% battery. So you're only using it just to get up, and then you're naturally foiling the whole time. But I think the crux of this question really is about what power level people are using, and that's why I find it so interesting that yourself and Paul Cooper are only using low power. We get a lot of feedback from customers that are like, it needs more power, it needs more grunt. I'm a bigger guy, I want to ride a small foil and it just doesn't have enough power for me. There is some extremities to that, of course, that heavier guys or really small boards and foils and really small bumps or whatever does make it a lot more difficult. But Paul Cooper must be 80 something.
He'd be heavier than me.
80 something, and he's still using very, very small boards, very small gear, and he can quite easily get up on low power mode. I also some previous foil drive owners that have the Assist Plus, like the Gen 1 stuff, low power mode is significantly lower thrust level than an Assist Plus. So it's this education, practice, technique, as Josh was saying, keeping the board flat and level, your personal understanding of how this gear works and the gear that you choose, your timing with when you get up and the bump and all that kind of stuff. Low power on a Gen 2 is still heaps of thrust.
I also really like the low power mode because I think I first started off on the medium power. You kind of get this bucking bronco effect because like the trigger becomes more sensitive, I find, and you kind of go in and out of the water and you're like, whoa, like it's just getting too much boost. Versus the low power mode, I feel like, especially with the 3 prop upgrade, it was just a smoother transition from foil driving to getting on foil. So I kind of wanted to make that as smooth as possible. And also like the benefit of not being like on the heavier side of things. I think I was allowed to do that. But then you saying Paul Cooper also, he's heavier than me and he uses low power mode.
And the context of that, the power modes and stuff, the power modes are set via the app on the phone, Bluetooth. You can also throttle limit on the controller as well. So power mode is not particularly a throttle limit. If you're on low power, you'll still get a range of 0 to 100% on the controller. If you throttle, the thrust is just reduced. So if you think about it in kilos or pounds, then changing the power mode is just changing the total available amount of thrust from 0 to 26 kilos of thrust, and you're just reducing that and capping it and say, I'm only going to get 20 kilos of thrust. If you throttle limit using the controller, which James Casey and I have done experiments with this sort of stuff too, and he uses for his coaching, that's actually limiting how far the trigger moves per se, but you've still got you're kind of achieving the same thing, but in a different way. And you can do it from the controller. So if you set low power mode, you're only ever going to get, I am making these numbers up because I don't know them off the top of my head, but 20 kilos on low power rather than the full 26. And if you need that bit more because the swell reduces or the bumps reduce or whatever, and you need some more to get up, you won't be able to do it because you need to connect with your phone. So you can play with both the app and its power settings, and then using Boost, which is your short little power just to get up. You can play with those there to work out your best settings, as well as the throttle limiter. And exactly as Josh said, when you reduce, if you do, one benefit of using it via the app is if you reduce down to low power mode, then yes, your throttle trigger, your physical movement of your trigger gets less sensitive.
Yeah.
So if you've got 0 to 100% is across X millimeters or inches of physical movement to control an entire 0 to 26 kilos of thrust. If you're now 0 to 20 kilos of thrust with the same physical movement, you've got more modularity, and 1 millimeter of movement makes less of a difference. So people that aren't quite as sensitive, and we get that feedback too, that we get two sides of the fence. The trigger's amazing and it's awesome. I love being able to modulate it, and other people saying I can't. I'm on or off.
Yeah, it just depends on your dexterity and how that all works. And I think you can, once you spend time in it, you kind of get used to it, or you can change the setting, get used to that.
And some people love the full adaptability and changeability and customization of the system, and other people want it simple.
Yeah, it's make it as wild as you want. The way it comes in the box is great. It works.
Yeah,
that's the way I wrote it the first time I went out. Just straight out of the box. No, I couldn't even.
Which is high power mode.
Yeah, we're just doing it, going for it. To get at the question, for me as a non-pro rider, 90 kilos, I'm in a different space than you. For me, flat water, what I really like, I like a board over 5 feet for sure. Almost the longer the better. And obviously that's not entirely true. There's
too long.
Yeah, there's too long. But in that 5 to 6 foot range for me works really well with foil drive in a lot of different ways and varieties. But especially for flat water, I don't want a 4'4" board.
No.
I want something I can get on the nose. I want something that's going to plane up. I don't want it to be 30 inches wide because then it's got a lot of drag, a lot of surface tension coming up. So for me, a little bit longer, a little narrower. The volume, you can go a higher volume, but I like to ride a little lower volume just to feel more of that prone board feel.
Yeah.
Be a little bit more in connection with the foil. But for me doing that, the big thing is the longer board, an appropriate foil. If you're learning, you've never done this before, you don't want to go out on a 600 centimeter foil, right? Like
start big,
pick a bigger foil. Yeah, especially in flat water, you don't need to worry about the wave overpowering you. You can go ride a 2,000 centimeter foil if you want to.
And that's probably a good tip in itself. Go in flat water your first. Go bigger and go in flat water for your first session. Yeah. Just get familiar with it.
And flat water can be, a range too.
For sure.
Are we talking glass flat here?
Yeah.
Or is it 1 foot chop? Because 1 foot chop in a lot of ways for me is harder than a 3 foot wave.
Yes.
Because you're constantly slapping and punching.
Yeah.
And it's every 2 seconds, right? Like that's some of the most challenging conditions in my experience anyway. So if you are in those conditions, I would say go with the swell, go with the current, don't fight into it.
Exactly.
And size up on your foil. If you are riding a smaller foil, and you have a long enough board, the other last tip that I've experienced as a heavier rider and somebody that's not, spent 1,000 hours on foil drive at this point, skipping the board for acceleration is key.
Yeah.
You don't want to just try to motor straight up, especially if you're in a smaller foil. Get the board planing, and then you get it like starting a wing foil in light wind.
Yeah.
You want to get it skipping.
Work that foil.
Because as soon as the foil lifts off and you level out, now you're accelerating.
Yeah.
And then even if you touch down, you slow down a little bit, but then you skip up and you accelerate more. So you're not trying to ramp right up on foil and take off like you would an e-foil.
Or a wing foil that's super low, like where you've got lots of energy.
Yeah, powered up where you can just
pull on it and just launch out of the water. It is an assist. I think the technique videos that we've got on our YouTube channel are really good.
They're awesome.
Masterclass one we did, because there is definitely a limit to that where I think we're getting moved on to new questions.
New questions.
But yeah, there's a technique thing very quickly there with just if you pump it too hard, you can just be going stall. So it is a fine art, I guess, of either just sitting there and getting the board really flat and level and picking up speed and going, and then sometimes you do need to break that tension and get it going. But if you do it too much, it's like trying to pump too soon when you're doing pedal ups. You're just stalling.
Yeah, you don't want to force it to rise up. You're almost doing one of these kind of things. So he's also asking 2 or 3 prop from the same question spelled by the foil.
I love 3 prop.
I've been on the 2.
Yep.
But
quick and simple, dirty way of explaining that is 3-blade is more torque sooner in the thrust. Think of it like a gasoline car or a diesel car. A diesel car's got a lot of torque to get a load moving, but then it doesn't particularly have the top end. And a 2-blade is quick off the line, but doesn't have much pull.
Josh, you said 3.
I like 3-blade just purely because of that same thing I said before. The 2-blade was too like in and out, like it was too much like boost, like turbo. Versus the 3-blade just comes out much more steadier.
Smooth,
yeah, lower power setting, but with the 3-blade,
and I really don't need that power, so that's why I like the 3-blade.
To get you out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And the other thing with the 3-blader is the surface driving capability. So if you imagine the table, which I hope isn't shot, but if the water line, when a motor is coming sort of in and out of the water, with 3 blades, you've always got a propeller in every third going in and out of the water, so you've got more drive, more physical. We sometimes think about it like a shovel. You've got 3 shovels always digging.
Yeah.
If it comes out of the water a little bit, it might be 2 shovels digging while the other one's in the air. But with a 2-blade, they're obviously opposing, and you've only ever got 1 shovel in the water at a time.
Yeah.
So that's why the 3-blade is kind of a bit better at that surface driving, and it's definitely smoother for sure, and not as much thrust reduction while the motor's going in and out, which makes a big difference when you're trying to punch out against chop for sure. It's just a bit smoother.
Florida Foilers, which you guys are headed there soon. Does the team plan to provide alternatives to the open blade design, possibly jet for beginners or something else to give users an improved sense of safety? Obviously not as efficient.
Yeah. So we just put out on our 4-wheel drive owners group a couple of weeks ago a bit of a poll. We've been testing a propeller cage or a prop guard, if you like. And off the back of that poll in the group, as well as our own testing and stuff, we are going to go ahead with that. So we are going to do a propeller guard. Exactly as Florida Foilers has said, definitely not as efficient and definitely not as nice a feeling foiling, but for sure has safety benefits, 100%.
Yeah,
so
for people that want it, we'll have it eventually here. So that's great.
Everything's a bit tricky with that. A prop guard is definitely not going to be recommended for surfing. It's actually quite large. By the time we've made it as small as we possibly can and as sleek as we possibly can. But as soon as you put that around a propeller, it is actually quite a physically large object. And as all foilers should know, drag is the enemy.
Yeah.
And anything in the water, we're talking about before of having a mast that's not 19 mil all the way to the bottom.
Yeah.
We're trying to reduce millimeters for an absolutely essential item being the mast.
Right, and it's foiled. It's not a cage that you're dragging.
By the time you put this cage that's like this big and has all these fins to help support that thing, it becomes very draggy very quickly. The propeller guard will definitely not be recommended for surfing, because if the motor comes out of the water and then it touches down, you will go over the bars. Almost guaranteed. It's like grabbing a whole bunch of weed, aerodynamic weed or hydrodynamic weed, and putting it on your mast. But you go over the bars. Everyone knows that from hitting weed. So it will definitely be much better for flat water foiling and for learning and things like that. And again, like we're talking about before with safety, everything's got to be respected for what it is. Just because you put a prop guard on doesn't mean that it's now.
You can't cram your finger in there.
Exactly. We've seen reports of other foiling brands that have, or E4 brands that have prop cages where people get their fingers stuck in there, and it actually creates almost a worse problem. So again, everything has to be taken for what it is and respected for what it is. A jet, I'll quickly touch on that. A jet is obviously possible. We could do it for sure. We have made jets before in the past. Some of Paul's background being the main designer of 4-wheel drive, he's built electric surfboards for like 15 years and has done full jet pump boards and things like that. It's funny seeing some stuff come out in the market and you're like, oh, we made that years ago. And it never made it out of his shed because it was great for what it is, but they are incredibly inefficient. They use a lot of energy. And one of the key points of foil drive is that it's small and it's light,
Right.
and you're using a very small amount of power to do quite a lot, but for a short period. So to use a jet, you need a lot of battery. You need a lot of battery. You need a lot of weight. A lot of weight means it's not a foil drive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
and I think there's
catch-22.
ideas with safety. There's also, I know some countries or areas with legalities
For sure.
with props, which
100%.
I don't know how they get away with it with boats and not other things, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
There's some accessibility issues maybe that we can work on as an industry and improve those things.
Short answer, prop guard coming, jet. It's then not a foil drive.
Yes.
Because it's just too big.
Quick one from Head Dip. For the waves, do you recommend the folding prop or the 3-blade prop, and why? Well, they both fold.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for surf, you can go either or.
Yep.
But what do you guys ride personally?
I kind of ride both, but I preference the 2. I'm light. I don't need the torque, like we said before. And I like the little bit of extra top speed. I just don't need the torque, so I just go 2. Yeah.
I'm just running a 3-blade all the time, just because I like the feel of it coming out of the water. It's just more smoother. And when I'm out of the water, it's usually not going in again unless I purposely put the board back in the water to use that motor.
Sure.
So it's like surfing wise, if it's going to dip, it's going to dip and feel shit. So
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same for me. I like having the 3-blade for smaller boards. So obviously prone foil driving as well. So are we testing with anyone over 110 kilograms? He's looking for a foil drive for light wind winging assist and to wake thief using foils like the 1300 and 1310. Any tips? 3-blade prop. I would say you'll be totally fine. I know we have customers in that range
For sure.
that are using them successfully without the 3-blade prop, but definitely somebody I would probably encourage to get the 3-blade, especially if you're riding smaller boards.
Definitely.
But on a big foil like that, I mean, I think either one's probably capable to get that up.
Yeah. As well as, like we sort of said before, start bigger. A lot of guys want to just jump straight into the small gear, small foils and whatever, which is 100% possible and doable, but just work your way into it. Find the biggest board you can to start with and get your head around it. That comes with some disclaimers as well of going and getting the biggest board, because you find a 32-inch wide board by 6 feet, it's actually exceptionally draggy.
Yeah, it's barge.
Yeah.
We know it from winging, right?
100%.
Like, if I go try to ride a 130-liter board now after riding 50, 60-liter boards for years, it's a nightmare. It's like, how am I going to, it's like trying to surf on a kayak,
For sure. And
Big
even
is
if you
not
can,
always better in that sense.
Exactly.
And like I think in that weight range, I would definitely go off recommendations and feedback of good boards. Don't just go out and buy a cheap board or whatever, because in this case, it's not it's not the foil drive. The foil drive has enough power. It's the board and the foil that is going to be limited. Yeah.
100%. But I mean, he's already on the right track. Big wings. Again, with winging and wake thieving in particular, everyone's riding tiny little trays. And when you've got a boat with however many hundreds of horsepower, or 100-something horsepower to go and pull you up, 110 kilo guy could ride a tray because he's only got to do a wakeboard.
Oh no, wake thieving, but he's probably stealing.
For sure.
Yeah, he lets the motor out.
If you're in
some wakes,
if you're in that wake scene per se, you're so used to seeing on wakeboards tiny little boards and things like that where they can just get pulled up. Yes, understanding wake thieving is a different thing, but when you're in that scene, you're used to seeing tiny stuff. Like we were talking about earlier, that kiters love tiny little wings, tiny little boards, and when they move to winging, they're like, I don't want to ride 1,000 square meter wing, and I don't want to ride a 5-foot board. I want to ride my little kite tray. And you're like, it just doesn't work. There's an understanding of what the equipment is good for and what equipment to use for certain disciplines. Once you add in heavier weight, well, then that becomes more important. So does the technique. I'm 60 kilos. My power to weight with a foil drive, I have ridden a 13-liter little 2.5-foot tray. My power to weight is ridiculous. Somebody like Paul or this guy at 110, your technique, your gear selection, your power to weight, everything's not working against you, but it gets harder. You got to choose things.
On the other end of things too, though, you do have more leverage in your body.
100%.
And you have more body to move that weight around, to move that board around. So for me, it's like, I can ride a slightly bigger board and it feels the same to me,
Mhm.
essentially, at least that's the way I like to think about it.
Yeah.
Somebody that's smaller riding a smaller board, like
Exactly.
I don't need to ride a 24-liter board because I'm 6'3", 200 pounds.
Yeah.
I have enough leverage to move that board around
Momentum and inertia.
in the same way.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, and when you have it that way, it's like the foil drive's the same weight no matter how much you weigh.
Yeah.
So if you're a heavier person, be able to move that foil drive around a little easier, I suppose. All the things being the same.
I can see Paul Cooper's jumped in as well on channel 1x1.
Cool.
Saying, yeah, he does use low power mode like we talked about. But for downwind the other day,
the start was really bad, and he wishes he left the boost on.
which is exactly what I was saying. Is if you turn the power down on the app, you're committing to that.
Right.
You've chopped the wing tips off your foil, and that's now what you have.
Right.
You have to wait to go back to the shop to glue them back on again if you want to make it bigger. If you just throttle limit, you're kind of achieving the same thing in some ways, sort of. But you can, while you're out there, just quickly flick through.
That's what I was going to say. To me, that says start one level up from where you think you want to be, and then level it down with the remote, so you can always level it back up. Because otherwise, you get stuck.
If you're teaching your kids or something to foil, throw it on low power mode. Yeah, on a big board out in the water.
Another tip I found out the other day was that whatever you would use normally for prone or supping foil size, I would always go the next size up for foil drive. That's just like what I've learned. Like if like the other day, I was using a 720 square centimeter for prone, and then I chucked the foil drive on it, and the extra weight from the unit, actually, it definitely made it harder to pump around in between using the actual motor. When I went back into shore and changed it to an 850 square centimeter, it was a dream. And like what you said before, with that extra weight, it actually helps with the leverage. So, don't be afraid to have a board that can you can do a bit more of an offset stance and actually helps the foil lean over. Because if you use a tiny board, a big foil is actually really hard to turn over. There's not enough real estate on the board to really leverage the rails to go over.
It's so close to the pivot point. That's
exactly.
Everything about foiling is pivot points and lever arms and leverage. So if you can't get further away from the pivot point, then you can't add that leverage to do things.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, especially when you get that motor kind of thrusting the nose up, like you were saying, like you don't want to.
That's a quick tip, actually.
Be doing that.
If you're going to be e-foiling or just burning around on flat water and the motor's down low, again, that's leverage. The motor is pushing from the very bottom of a lever, and it's got more power against you, and you've got to level it out further. Move your mast all the way to the back of the track if you're e-foiling, because then it brings that lift back, and it brings your pivot point back. You've got more room to get forward on your board, and the further forward you are on the board, the more leverage you have against that power of the motor pushing. So that could be a quick tip as well for people.
Yeah, I'd agree. Usually 1 to 2 inches further back versus where I normally ride.
And again, that depends on the board too. Some boards with a positive nose up sort of attitude built into their box are not very good foil drive e-foil boards, because they're already built with the nose up, and then you go and put thrust at your lever arm, pushing the nose up even further, and all of a sudden you're riding around.
It's like a wheelie.
Exactly. So that is the really hard thing, and this is across the board. Let's take this comment for absolutely everything. It's amazing that foil drive can fit to existing gear, but not all existing gear is particularly good for foil drive. So as Josh said, some older boards that are really wide, really fat, have interesting shapes on the bottom of them, or lots of nose rocker and stuff like that, can actually be really detrimental to how successful your session is, or your learning
box
curve
position,
is.
right?
100%.
Certain brands' box positions are so far forward, and then depending on what foil you're using,
that may not work.
They may be incompatible even without foil drive, but especially with foil drive. And that extra thrust to punch the nose up, that could not work. And that's why we're here. I mean, if you ever have a question like that, call the shop. We're well versed in almost all brands, even if you don't carry them. So,
how quick, Solo Pelican, how quickly does the controller reconnect after being turned off? Quick one on this that we covered in the Paul and I did a tech talk recently about controller signal and all that kind of stuff. And this comes back to where we're talking about the throttle safety right at the start of this live. When you lose signal between the controller and the box, or when the controller is turned off and then you turn it back on, The electronics inside the foil drive itself want to see 0% throttle before it will arm, and then you can pull the throttle. The actual connection process only takes about a second, maybe a second and a half. But if you turn the controller on and then pull the throttle straight away, the controller, you've done that during that 1 period second when it's trying to reconnect and talk to each other and go, hey, I'm a controller, hey, I'm a foil drive, yep, I talk to you, yep, I listen to you, and then they go. If you've pulled the trigger in that time, then the controller goes, hey, we're talking to each other now, but hey, you've got throttle on, I'm not going to start, because it's a safety feature.
Right.
You don't want to have the throttle mashed all the way in, turn the controller on, then it just goes straight to full throttle.
Right.
So it's looking to see 0% throttle for at least, I think it's half a second is what it's programmed.
And maybe they're aiming the question too. I know with some of our e-foils, they aren't connecting the same way that foil drive connects.
Gotcha.
It's so instant.
Yep.
Where you have to pair.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? With a lot of
Each
e-foils, you got to pair them with the Bluetooth or whatever it is. It takes 10 seconds or more sometimes to match them up every time you should power off and power back on. So it's not the case.
No.
We
can still pair if you get a new controller or a new foil drive or whatever else or whatnot.
And if you're on missing signal occasionally, the remote's not turning off, but you're disconnecting signal. That's a locking mechanism setting, but also the latency setting can help you avoid that situation maybe.
Where this is really important to remember is the tech talk that Paul and I just made a week or two ago we put out was about using small boards and carbon boards and things like that. And if you're getting connection dropouts because the whole board's going underwater or your controller's going underwater, if you're having that connection issues, we had a lot of people that they lose connection and then they bring the board back out of water or something, but then they're just mashing the throttle.
Right.
They're losing connection, mashing the throttle. The ESC, the electronics inside the box are going, I need to see 0 first for the safety thing. And then they're just going, it's not working, it's not working. Oh, there you go, it's working. Oh, no, it's not working. And then just mashing the throttle. So that's where we talked about in the tech talk. If you're having those sort of problems, and even if you fall in the water, controller goes under the water or anything like that, come up, take your hand off, look at the screen. You've got your signal bars, you've got your telemetry. Just sit for a second, then slowly pull the throttle and go. And if it drops out, take the finger off. 1, 2, pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Again, understanding how it works really helps you.
I had a panic moment in Adelaide where I came down off foil on the foil drive and was waiting for Jamie to come because he was a bit slower. Mm-hmm. And then as he came past, I just grabbed the remote and went like this and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then I went into full panic mode and I was like, oh my God, we're a mile out to sea and this thing just stopped working.
Yeah.
And then Jamie was like, have you put the remote on your board? And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I just had a panic moment where I just I forgot the basics of you got to put the remote on the board sometimes to help the connectivity through it.
You're on small
and I always knew that, but for some reason I just went into straight panic mode where I was like, oh my God, this thing's broken now. Yeah. And he just because I must have just also been just pulling the trigger, but up in the air.
Yeah.
And then I just thought about it. Well, he told me, he was like, put the controller on the board. And I was like, oh, sweet, I'm going again.
Yeah.
So
but that understanding of the reconnect sequence of a safety process, as well as just a little bit of wireless signal reconnecting type stuff, having that understanding of that, of just slowing down.
Yeah, just before you just do anything, take a breath.
Slowly pull the trigger. Don't just smash it because you're not helping the system.
And let me just take a minute and commend you guys on the knowledge base free products too. Your videos are fantastic. There's even more depth in the website and the blog stuff. Mm-hmm. We have stuff in our YouTube and our blog stuff.
Yeah.
But also the Foil Drive Owners Facebook group is a great spot. If you guys have any questions or, just general knowledge or wanting to learn more about Foil Drive, those are all phenomenal resources. It's not something don't feel like you have to come to a Q&A on YouTube with you to ask these questions. I think almost every question we've answered has probably already been addressed in one of your videos or blogs at some point so far. And that's not to say this isn't valuable, but just to plug how much knowledge you guys have and how hard you've worked to really make sure everybody has access to that knowledge and how to have the most fun and lowest amount of stress in their foil drive.
But by the same token, we're constantly learning about how people use our product, and the product's evolving and changing as we go. So we're constantly updating it, and there is a lot to know and a lot to learn. Same with foiling. There's so many different idiosyncrasies and little bits of information that grow and develop all the time. So we're constantly updating it. And if we've missed things, or if there's a piece of information that you think would be very useful for us to have, we're always open to suggestions. And like I said right at the start of this Q&A, like we're constantly learning about what people want and need from us or from our product. So yeah, any suggestions or feedback on the stuff we have too, we're constantly trying to improve it. We're not trying to just go, oh, well, sweet, that's done now.
I think it's a good community as well, where like maybe people who have been using Foil Drive for a long time, they're more than willing to answer someone who's just bought one.
100%.
So it is such, and I think that just comes from foiling in general. It's like such a good community feel where people want to encourage other people to do it and help them on their way, because foiling and foil driving, it is technical. Like it's not straightforward. Like there's a lot of different moving parts that can be interchanged, and it's nice to know that the community is there to support each other.
100%.
Yeah, in the shop as well. So if you
Yeah,
ever have any
totally,
questions, you buy it from us,
Yeah.
you didn't, we don't really care. We're here to help.
Yeah.
We don't know as much as this guy right here, but we know quite a bit. We've played with them a lot. We've run into those issues and addressed them already. And if we don't have the answer, we can get it and make sure we get back to you guys, you know, with the right answer, not just somebody throwing mud at the wall like, oh, try this. Like, no, let's get the right answer here. So
we also want to be very transparent that we, like the owners group, for example, we do run it and manage it, and we try to be as active as we possibly can in there, but we don't moderate it beyond where we feel like we want to be transparent about things. There's always problems with little bits and pieces, and there's always customers that don't like a particular setup or have a problem with something or whatever. We learn a lot from that group, and we use a lot of the feedback we get from that group to help improve the content, the product, what we put out, what we say, what we make. But we don't moderate it and just delete anything that's remotely negative. Like if you're on the fence about getting a foil drive and not sure about certain aspects of it or whatever, go check out that group, because we don't delete problems or things, and the community do jump in and help somebody through a problem or a misunderstanding or a technique thing or a product thing or whatever it may be. So it's we try to keep it pretty open and honest. And
it's amazing how
leave
active
it as
you
it
guys
comes,
are on there, and it's
still moderate it to make sure it's, you know,
it's just kind of a fun place to hang out, even and see like, oh, what's that person doing? Oh, they have an awesome new photo. Like,
and for gear requirements, we're talking about that 110 kilo guy and what gear and whatever. And I've just seen Sport by Foil suggesting the Foil Drive Axis collab boards that are coming out soon. That sort of stuff with what board do I use, what gear do I use, technique-y type stuff. The amount of times we have the community jump in and say, hey, why don't you get your wife or girlfriend or partner or whatever to film some footage of you struggling to get up, and we'll look at it for you. And like, no, man, you got to get further forward, or you're on the wrong board, or I'd recommend you try this wing or whatever.
Change your mask position.
That's huge, and that's really hard for us as a brand. We can't. There's only so many of us. You know, the team's growing all the time, but there's only so many of us and through our team riders, what Josh is taking over now as well, that we can't make gear recommendations for hundreds of different foil brands and hundreds of different boards.
That's what we do.
For thousands of you guys do that, and you're much closer to the actual individual gear and what's out there. But by the same token, the community, that's the biggest, best resource you have if you are looking for, I have a whatever foil and this board, is that going to work for me in 3-foot surf? Go to the community and ask the community, because there's probably somebody who's of a similar weight category and similar conditions with the same gear.
I think while we're talking about community, I think it's really good to chat about building like a good culture around foil drive. I think foil drive can definitely be used in a piggish way, and maybe
for evil.
Like it's just totally. It's like it's definitely proven that the foil drive can get you like 1 million waves in like an hour. And I think we just got to be smart about where we use it and who we use it around. And I think, you know, we don't want to be classed as an evil product because one guy selfishly in his area is taking 1 million waves off other water users.
100%.
So I think it's nice to know that the community is there to kind of instill a good culture. Like, we're not saying to not foil drive. I'm just saying, like, we need to be smart about how we do it, because it's proven that, you know, if someone's getting 1 million waves, other people are going to get jealous, or they're going to feel like their water time is getting stolen off them from someone else. So we just got to be respectful, and I
Yeah.
think community is also really good at instilling that.
Mhm.
We've got ambassadors placed all around the globe that we think are good people to kind of represent foil drive and instill these good cultures. So yeah, I think we gotta be very aware that we just don't want foiling to get banned in certain places,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and also like for e-foiling and foil assist
Yeah, the
products.
legalities of all of
Yeah,
that.
because like it's such a fun toy to have, and we don't want that taken away
Yeah.
from us.
Well, it
We
can
wanna
always
be
be
part
used
of
in
the
such a
solution.
positive way too, right? Like,
Totally.
it's a whole new way to experience the water
Mhm.
and get out and access areas where people normally won't. To
Mhm.
ride in areas where normally you cannot.
I
To
think,
grab
yeah,
waves that are deeper where no one's sitting. There's no reason to come blasting through a surf lineup, or steal all the waves in the surf lineup.
where they're the
There's
only
plenty
people.
of waves
Yeah,
somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
If you want to ride breaking waves, but you don't need breaking waves for foil drive or foiling, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's so much fun to rip just open faces
Half the joy of
and
foiling
not
and
get
why people-
detonated on the inside.
Yeah.
Like, keep the party going on the outside. You can do whatever you want. It's all the world to
Mhm.
play with, right?
I
Like,
think Paul
we
Cooper
don't-
said it. Yeah,
we don't
really.
need to anger all the people in this.
Yeah,
Let's experience all of this.
yeah.
And for them, it's like,
It's like open
oh
your
yeah,
mind
you're
a little
foil
bit more.
driving. It's like, yeah, one less person in the lineup,
Yeah.
man. You should want all your friends to foil drive because you'll have the lineup to yourself.
Totally. Paul Cooper said it really well in his last podcast. He could be surfing at like his main break where he always surfs in a super popular day, but he'll just get the waves before they break and then he'll peel out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one is annoyed. He's getting a million waves before they even break, and
I
he's
love it.
stoked.
He's picking out the best
Yeah,
wave, and
exactly.
I'm like, I want the one he's
Yeah.
on because that's the best one.
So like everyone's happy in that situation. I think that's a really smart move, and just a good way of sharing the ocean with other people.
There's some awesome footage of myself and Paul from the Assist Plus release 2-something years ago that is exactly that, down at our local beach break where we're just way, way, way out the back, and we peel off well before we even get to the lineup.
Yeah.
We're all in the same place, all in the same kind of area on the beach, but we're just way out the back going around out here. And then it sort of starts to peak up and starts to break, and then there's all the surfers on the inside. So I think you're right. We just want to be part of the solution more so than the problem. And there will be some people out there that push the limits and whatever, and that's where the community is really, we're helping the community and want to support the community to pull those people up too and be like, come on.
Yeah,
like,
let's self-police this,
let's-
not make it a thing.
self-police it.
Let's
We're
go
all
about
we're
that.
all
That's
people
good.
that love the wind and the water.
Yeah.
Let's all
Exactly.
band together and keep access
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
Shut it
creating
down.
unnecessary rules. That's
Edward,
up to us, I think.
Edward's asked about how surfable is the integrated mast on the E4 position. We got a lot of questions on that when we first released the Project Cedrus integrated mast, being the first one, and now we've got the Axis. And there is a whole bunch of brands that we're working with at the moment for integrated mast too, so keep an eye on that. But we got this question a lot when we first did the integrated mast because one of the downsides of the integrated mast is the motor is fixed.
Right.
Once you build it into a certain position, that's it. It will be like that forever. It is definitely possible. We've got footage online, which is not probably made obvious enough, of which clips an e-foil mast that's being surfed with the motor off, because it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
But there is clips online of people doing that. We've tried it ourselves.
I know Cole, our guys, surfed it with everything, the unit and everything on the board.
Yeah, right.
Ran out of battery and he
Just
just
keep
tucked the
surfing.
remote in his pocket and went prone.
Yeah.
I think maybe what they're getting at too, and this maybe coming from us as an e-foil dealer as well,
Sure.
there's always like this push in e-foiling to make it surfable,
Mhm.
right? But it's so hard because the motor's down there and the prop and all that. What I would say, based on my experience with a lot of different e-foils
Mhm.
and foil drive, is if that is specifically what you want to do and you don't want the motor up higher on the mast,
Mhm.
foil drive's the best option for that.
Yeah.
And the reason being, it's the smallest motor pod. It's got a folding prop. It's the smallest prop.
Mhm.
It's just less drag.
Yeah.
That being said, it's not ideal.
Mm.
You're going to need more
Agreed.
wave power. You're
Mhm.
probably going to need a bigger foil just to keep you
Yeah.
moving.
Like we said
And the
before,
drag's
it's
going
just,
to make it harder to keep up
it's
with
just drag.
the wave. Yeah.
Anything in the water, we're talking again before about millimeters off a mast making a difference, or how high you fly
No.
on the mast making a difference. Once you add a motor pod, yes, it is pretty small, but once you add anything in the water, it is drag. So to answer the question, yes, you can surf an e-foil mast. The two difficult things being drag, additional drag, even with the motor turned off. It's not crazy draggy like catching weed. You can 100% surf it, but there is drag. It's physics. You can't have this is what, actually I'll come to that point. Drag. Second one is, like you were saying earlier, Kiri, of motor going in and out of the water and things like that. The change, and what I was saying before about leverage too, the change between being on power and being off power is quite a big difference in body shift, where you have to be on the board.
Oh yeah, you've
got
all
it's
this just
shuffle.
to keep the nose up.
You've got
totally.
all this leverage of 20 something kilos of thrust, whatever it is you need to keep flying with your wing and your weight. You've got all this leverage from right down at the bottom of the mast where it's pushing the nose up, and you're counterbalancing that to keep flying. And then as soon as you drop the trigger, you need to jump back to then balance the wing again, because all that leverage of thrust removes. So the weight and balance, if you like, changes significantly. And then also once you peel off the wave and go to come back on the power, you've got to like jump forward again.
And that's true of any e-foil or
Correct.
foil drive I've used. It's
How
like
good you are on the throttle.
that and the weight shift, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lot easier just to kick the mast out of the water with the motor.
Yeah.
It's a much more natural progression.
Yeah.
You know, because you're kind of coming out of the water, it cuts the drag, but you're also sort of like stalling up, right, before you kind of start aiming back down and gliding.
Correct.
So it's
the point I wanted to come back to about drag was reminding me that we keep seeing people saying, oh, like competitors saying, oh, it's a zero drag product. It's like, there's no such thing. If you worked out how to defy physics, please email Paul, because he would love to know about how to defy physics and just not have these problems. But anything in the water will be dragged. There is no such thing as a zero drag system. And that's sort of why I wanted to come back to it, as a point I wanted to make about, I think comes back to the transparency thing and the community and the group and all that kind of stuff. We don't sell or market things that aren't real and aren't here now. Unless we have a physical thing in our hands to show you guys, or we're getting close enough to the point that we can actually start to release it to the public and to the market and actually sell it and supply it, we don't advertise things that don't exist. So it's like everything that we talk about, the prop guard and all that kind of stuff, we're only talking about it in a public setting like this because we have a physical object. We have physically ridden it, we physically used it, and the manufacturing process is underway, and it's something that's actually coming.
It's exciting. You guys aren't taking the foot off the pedal here.
Exactly.
Talking to you guys, stuff that you're working on, it's really exciting.
Exactly.
And let me say, it's not a reason to not buy in and start having fun now, because it's all stuff that's modular.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
So that's huge.
We try, I think, a lot more effort than people realize goes into us trying to think forwards and backwards about, well, somebody that bought 6 months ago, if we bring this out today, can they use that? And that is really, really hard to make things forwards and backwards compatible when you're always trying to move forward. And it's exceptionally difficult to make something that fits with many hundreds or thousands of different products that are already on the market. So it's I'm not trying to say woe is us or anything like that. It's a lot of time and effort goes into thinking about you guys that own products from 6 months ago, or in 6 months' time. That's something that we bring out that we want it to be a feature. We try as hard as we possibly can to make things forwards and backwards compatible, but sometimes to move forwards, you can't go backwards.
Yeah, it's shocking how well it all just integrates.
We try really hard.
It's a testament to you guys' engineering and just the quality of the product.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's stunning how well it works and how technical it is and how few issues we face. And we've sold a lot of these. They're hugely popular. They're out there being used actively every day.
Exactly. And that's the thing.
The amount of issues we've had come up are almost nothing on a brand new product. It's shocking, especially coming from a shop perspective that's worked in e-foils and e-bikes and e-skates and one wheels and stuff. It can be a nightmare if things go wrong, especially on a broad scale.
Yeah.
So we're so stoked that you guys have such a reliable product and awesome, troubleshooting and support as well when you need it.
The question about like feature specs for wish list for Gen 3, as we've been talking about, like I'm not going to avoid the question. Like we're always working on new things. I think too many people try to avoid what's next sort of stuff. We're always working on things. Of course, there's stuff I can't talk about that we're working on. Gen 2, as I was saying to you before, and I'll show you the photos later, we were riding Gen 2 in June of 2021. It was not a ready product. It was not something that was ready to go, but we were writing basically the system we've ended up with. And that's my point about we don't talk about things that aren't real and that we don't have.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff and all sorts of concepts. This is definitely not. Same with foiling. We're not at the end of the progression of foiling and gears, foils, boards.
I'm not sure what I would ask for, honestly. Like the Gen 2 is so good.
Yeah.
It's so light. It's so sleek. It's so well packaged. It's so
Yeah.
functional. I mean, and you can adapt it in 1,000 ways.
For sure.
I'm not sure what I would ask for other than, your typical foiler questions.
Yeah.
Make
Delete
it
the
lighter.
battery.
Yeah, delete the battery or make
Delete
the
the
battery
battery.
lighter.
Zero drag, no battery.
If you could make 0 weight, endless runtime, that'd be great.
Heaps of brass. Yeah. What did we say before? Like a brain-driven throttle. And Neuralink throttle.
Josh, maybe you have something to say here, being in the upper echelon of riders. If you could
Change
magically
anything?
put a Gen 3 on the table, what would that do? What would it look like?
I think I'm like what you said. I'm happy with it. The only thing is carrying it down to the beach. It's heavy. Like if you could just make it lighter, like that's the only thing. Because to be honest, I don't know if you could somehow make the motor more smaller but still as much power. I don't know. Maybe play with like not as much power, because I don't even use the high power mode, so you don't need a motor as big. Or I don't know. Who knows?
Much like foiling, it's kind of splitting off into its own little genres, and now we're getting very specific gear that you're no longer surfing your downwind gear or winging your prone gear or whatever. Like it's a couple of years ago, foiling was kind of like this one thing, and you kind of just used it for different stuff, but it was okay for everything, but not specialized. There's definitely options for things like that with this sort of hybrid electric type systems, that there's people saying, I want more runtime and I don't care about the weight. I want it to be bigger. So it's like, maybe we go down that route and then have a completely separate route that is the really lightweight, freaks of the foiling world that can do everything and anything anyway. It's the options are endless. I will sort of say, while there's all these ideas around what future could look like with our products and whatever else, Gen 2 still has a lot of little tweaks and little bits and pieces that, as we're talking about, a modular system, improving lots of little bits and pieces with it and moving forward. And lots of feature requests for things like travel batteries, for example. Again, I don't talk about them unless they're real.
Right.
So
don't go waiting for Gen 3. It might never arrive. Gen 2 is amazing.
Exactly.
It just came out. This is the fresh new stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the leap that's been made, I think, from Assist Plus to Gen 2 is unreal.
For
me, the biggest thing's just been how you've condensed everything into a mast on top system.
Yeah.
Because it totally blew off, the lid on how the board feels and reacts. It feels so much more just like a board. Yeah. It doesn't feel like an e-foil. Yeah. And I don't think anyone else is doing that. Yeah. So
and by the same token, Gen 1 still has lots of valid points and lots of valid reason. There's still plenty of Gen 1s out there running around, Assist Pluses, and we still sell and support the Assist Pluses too. There's still new kits going out the door every day. So for certain people in certain scenarios, and it is a bit cheaper. Yeah. And if you're on a SUP board, you've got plenty of space on the back, and you can get especially with the new downwind boards, having the mast boxes closer or further up the board. By having the box on the back of the board, the weight's almost over the mast now anyway on some setups. So not everything has to always go to the latest. Some of the stuff from last year is still really, really good gear, and plenty of it coming up secondhand too, to get into foiling more and still use it. It's still perfectly good stuff. Yeah,
there's limitations to design too. You can't just go, oh, dude, make it lighter, make it smaller, make it faster, make it better. Yeah. Like until the world becomes this, and we have these special kind of batteries that will allow us to do that. Yeah. You guys are kind of pushing the limits of what's possible, I would say, already. And it's phenomenal. Yeah. So
and that Assist Slim is basically a battery with a bit of electronics stuck on the side. It's tiny. That thing nearly killed Paul to design. And I remember like halfway through the design process, I'm saying, I'm going to have to make it 2 millimeters taller. And I just don't know whether it's worth it anymore. I'm like, dude, it's 2 millimeters. Like, I think it's definitely still worth it. So that thing is as small as it can possibly get for the time being, with the the technology that's available to the general public. We're not military. We don't get access to that stuff.
Right.
Eventually, that'll trickle down, and we'll grab it as soon as we can,
That's great.
and bring it to the water sports world. But yeah.
So Josh, we got H2O Kiter wants you to come up and downwind Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. Well, you're here right now, but the conditions aren't helping. And you have been to Superior.
I've been to Superior a couple years ago, and I had amazing downwind conditions, and actually had a really fun prone day the day after the wind. And I think we were proning Stony Point.
Yeah.
And the locals there were saying that's the best they've seen it in like decades. So it felt very special. Today we went past the what's the break that you brought us past?
Yeah, just Grand Haven City Beach. Yeah.
It looked fun, but the waves were like this big.
Yeah,
but we might foil drum it later. Like
you
never know. It's like there's a little ripple there. I'd love to meet the locals and get a session in with the crew. So yeah, hit us up.
Yeah, and if you are local, these guys will be here today.
Today and tomorrow.
Today's Tuesday, and then Wednesday for a bit tomorrow before you head out. So drop in and say hello.
And then,
hello. And
we'll be at FSRL in Florida. So if there's anyone, I think I heard from the organizers like 60 people signed up or something for that event.
That's great.
So it's so cool to see that many.
There's so many people down there this time of the year. Even like our locals, we have a handful of locals that are down in Florida for the winter.
Yeah,
it's just the place to be for foiling in the winter time. So,
and it's so awesome to have more of these events being organized, like I said at the start, for organized for foilers, or your downwind race recently in Sydney. It was just awesome. We had 40
more. I think we had the same, about 50, 60 people.
Wow,
yeah,
that's great.
Rock up to just a pretty quickly organized downwind race in Sydney, and it was just so cool to have that many people all together. And myself and Paul Cooper did it full drive, and I know there's a bunch of the Hawaiian races that we're talking to the organizers over there, and we're going to do
full drive
Awesome.
divisions.
I think that's great. It really opens it up.
Yeah.
To people that aren't Josh level athletes.
Yeah.
I can foil, but my paddle skills
isn't that cool? Like you can compete with like the rest of the crew doing the SUP. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
Because you don't have you're not in Hawaii every day doing the downwind runs that those guys are doing, but you could, if you wanted to, just fly over there, hook up the four drive setup and compete with those guys. I think that's so cool, because that's the main thing. I think that's great for foil drive, is that it just, if you don't have all the time in the world to be out in the water learning these skills that take forever, like literally forever to kind of get good at, the foil drive can just quickly shortcut you to that level, which is great.
What is Mr. Koo's hair routine?
Yes.
To maintain
the luscious locks. Gauge foils.
No way.
That's great.
I just got a haircut before this, so that's the reason why it's looking good. My missus told me I needed a haircut because it was looking horrible. It was going cockatoo style. So thank you. Thanks, Gage.
He deflected. He has a secret hair routine. Yeah, can't be disclosed.
We're staying with him for a week.
I use the foil drive grease you get in the box. So
that's
classic. Is there any we've skipped or?
Thank
you so much to everyone who's asked questions.
Yeah, it's been
fun. Before we head out, does anybody have any remaining questions? Any burning things you need to know?
Have you missed anything, Caleb?
I don't think so. Someone asked if a toe got chopped off, but I don't think there's been any toes chopped off.
And again, this comes back
chopped
to
off would be pretty aggressive. I mean, cut maybe, but how do you get your toe in and under the board? Like, what are you wrestling that thing?
And again, we're not going to hide away from it. There has been some injuries. How many people have hit a foil, or a tail, or a board, or a wing?
Raise your hand if you've been cut by a knife while you're cooking.
Exactly. Right? Or hit by a foil.
Let's not blame the knife.
Been in a car crash, or it doesn't really matter what it is. All these things are fun toys, but they are dangerous. We are floating, talking about going miles offshore in the ocean. You can just have a crash and hurt yourself.
Yeah, you need a beacon, you need a phone or something. Yeah, have a plan in place.
You can have a body malfunction and you can't get yourself back in, and you drown or get blown out into the water. What we're doing is we're not wrapped up in cotton wool sitting at home with the aircon on. We're out in the ocean, we're out in the elements, we're playing with swords, we're playing with electric motors and batteries and electricity in water and motor, propellers, spinning objects. All this stuff needs a level of respect, and there will be some injuries along with that. We're doing an action sports thing out in the wild. But obviously we're as a manufacturer and as a brand trying to do as much as we possibly can from both the hardware side, the education side, and the sharing of knowledge side to give people the best fighting chance of looking after themselves and their friends and their loved ones and their gear as well.
Yeah, it's a high level. This is a high level tool, right?
Exactly.
Like, this isn't a resort toy that you're going to leave on the beach for families to play with. Like, that's not what it is.
Mhm.
It's a high performance machine.
Yeah.
You know, from our perspective, the people we see buying into them are people that are already engaged in surfing, foiling, wind sports.
Yeah.
You know, they understand, you know, the
Mhm.
risk in the fact that it requires some knowledge and some common sense.
Yeah.
But for those people that are maybe like a little gun shy, or, you know, maybe just considering like, hey, what's the best way to address this because I want my 12-year-old kid to ride it.
Yeah.
Sanding the prop, is that something you'd suggest? Or motor guard, what do you think is like the optimum, like, hey, if you want to just use one thing to kind of improve, you know, what could happen, what would it be?
I mean, I think certainly for the kids, when we have got the propeller guard for sure, it's definitely an extra safeguard. Things like limiting the throttle. If they're a 40-kilo kid, they do not need full power.
No.
100%. You could probably set them to like...
Yeah, there's learner mode, right?
Yeah, there's a learn mode, which again is just an even lower power mode than low. But you can throttle limit them, you put the new lock function on so that it, you know, put it on 2 seconds so that the controller locks as soon as they let go of the trigger. Also, things like the setup that you put them on. Don't put them on a tiny little 4.2, even though they're a 40-kilo rider, 30-kilo rider. Don't put them on a little 40, or maybe, let's say, a 4.6,
right,
35-liter or something. Don't put them on a tiny little board, because then it's just less shield around them and the foil. And honestly, we see far more injuries from people stalling, tacoing, landing on board rails or on foils than we do ever with the motor.
Right.
So, you know, something like we've talked about a lot with coaches and first timer sort of sessions, put the motor right up near the board.
That's what I was going to say.
The little kid,
the board,
put them on a big sup. It's wider, it's longer, it's bigger. They can't get to the foil. If you've got a short mast, sure, again, leverage. If they've got, don't put them on a ginormous wing that is really wide, because then again, it's easier for them to fall onto things and it's harder for them to steer. They've got far less weight to manage that wing. Sure, they can go really, really slowly because they've got lots of lift, but it's harder for them to control. And put the motor right up near the board where they're only going to get that far off the water, but they're still going to love it. They're going to love it whether they get on foil or not. They're trying to burn around and pull a trigger and the splashing.
Yeah, the kid's going to learn faster than any of us did anyway. So
exactly.
They're freaks like that.
But we say that anyway for absolute beginner sessions anyway. Put the motor high. They'll only get 25 centimeters off the water or whatever, but they'll learn that balance and how responsive a foil is and how little movement you need. And you cannot breach the wing when you're at 25 centimeters. When the motor's at 25 centimeters, you cannot breach the wing. You can't stall while you're really high, have the board roll over and land on a foil.
Sure.
Because you're only that far off the water and you go, hup, plop, hup, plop. That's the worst you're gonna do. So there's lots of safety things like that you can think about. And obviously just as best tuition as you can give somebody, you know, while we're starting out.
I love this question. Spoiled asked this one, so let us know what your question is, Spoiled. But Head Dip says, what is your favorite U.S. retailer and why is it MACkite? That's the best.
No, you guys are great.
He actually told me yesterday that he is your favorite, like he's the favorite shop to go to. I know he buys from you guys.
That's awesome.
He's a friend of mine, Head Dip. Yeah.
Yeah.
He fully talked you guys up and said
I
you
can't
guys are
remember
amazing.
whether we've met, but we've certainly spoken online and stuff like that.
Oh, you would have. He
Yeah,
knows
for sure.
He's the
He does.
encyclopedia of foiling.
100%.
Yeah. He does not miss a thing like this.
Legend.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, you guys have been awesome to work with, and I think we're in Australia. We're on the other side of the planet. Like, there's time zones, there's customer support, there's knowledge base, there is just physically getting the stuff. There is, like every single thing in the world, there is little problems that pop up from time to time, and you guys have been awesome to extend our desire for what we want our brand and business to be. And we want it to be just, we're all foilers, we all ride and use the gear that we make and design. We're constantly evolving it and changing and updating it, and we're just trying to help people to enjoy what we made for us. We actually made these products out of selfishness of wanting them for ourselves, and they weren't available, so we just made them ourselves. And we use them and design them and ride them. Everything's done in house. And then to take that product and send it to the other side of the planet and have somebody who can help us continue that message and do that last step when we can't physically be there or within the same time zone. It's really hard to find people who care and align with our, what we want to do, which is just have fun on the gear and help other people have fun on it.
Yeah, that's where we're at as
Simple as
well.
that.
Yeah, we want to answer questions, help you have more fun on the water. And obviously foil drive is a huge part of that. It affords you so many more days, so much more fun on the average days or the not as fun days or the epic days. I mean, honestly, you can use it all the time. But
what seems to be the most popular that you're selling out of MACkite for foil drive?
Unit wise?
Yeah.
I'd say the Max Power 25 centimeter is our top seller. And that's a few reasons. I think number one, it's a lot of people buying it that haven't been foil driving yet. So there's a little bit of range anxiety. They know they want the full power just in case they need it. They know they want more battery so that they can go out there and have a longer session. They know they might need a little bit more assist, as somebody that's learning, or, it might be that they're just throttling around a lot more than you would say on a downwind run where you're going to use 20% of battery in 40 miles. It's just for that customer and for myself as well. Honestly, like I'm not upset about riding the Max Power around. I can do everything on a Max Power that I can do on my Prone board. It feels maybe a tiny bit different, but with the weight being so central, it's really not a limiting factor in what you can do at all.
Back to Paul Cooper and Eric Anderson. They're both just loving the Max Power. Everyone's seen the videos of Paul Cooper flipping and jumping and spinning.
And they got every type of unit, but they resort back to the Max Power and Max unit. Yeah,
they're loving it.
Yeah, not that the Slim isn't great, because I love the Slim as well. That's what I ride the most, because the other guys at the shop are always stealing the Max. So I get kind of left, with the leftovers. But for me, buying one Max Power 25 centimeter, and then that way with the cord, it gives you just that range of adjustability. I think that was something that was kind of lost on me and a lot of people, getting into foil drive, is you don't have to ride it at the full cord length. So when you buy a cord, you're buying it at your max length you're going to use it. So if you want to be able to adjust between 12 and 25 centimeters, you buy the 25 centimeter cord and then you just slack it up and tape it to the side of the mast. It works great.
Yeah, you can't make things longer, but you can bunch extra up. It does obviously cause a little bit of extra drag and it doesn't look as nice and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can 100% do that. And especially when you're not like maxing out the potential of the system. So like talking about 110 kilo guy trying to ride, a smaller wing or a smaller board or whatever, all those little 1 or 2, 5% increment.
Yeah, especially in an e-foil mode, it's going to matter.
For sure. But if
when it's up here,
you
already have the air-water mixture barrier here, all the chaos going around the mast plate and the unit. A bump being on the side of the mast rather than behind the mast is inconsequential, especially with the power of foil drive.
Exactly. It does make a bigger difference than you realize, especially when you're at high speed. So like if you're surfing and you touch down at speed, all those little extra bits of drag do definitely make a difference. But again, if you're learning and you're progressing and you're getting better at what you're doing, to have that little bit of a loop there is not going to be like throwing a whole bunch of weight around your foil. And you can't get on foil. There's going to be a 5, 10, whatever the percentage difference might be. But for sure, you can do that. But if you buy a 15 and you really decide you need a 20 or a 25, then you can't make it longer.
Right.
For sure. But again, there's some improvements and changes coming there as well, in terms of, some of the bits and pieces to try and make decisions like that a bit easier for customers too, further down the track.
That's great.
All
right. So from Spoiled, we got, what is your favorite?
Side.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Tucker is a G from the early days. First time I've ever been called a G in my life. Riding the early first slingshot foils. Yeah, in the lift before that. That was a wild ride. I like MACkite, always great tips, great prices. And love all the options. Thanks for all the sessions. I thought that was going to be a question. Thank you. We love you too, Spoiled.
Yeah.
You met my friend.
And we want to do more of
Brother
these
Bobby,
Q&As too,
Bobby.
like Paul and I and yourself, and with our team writers too. Like we try to do a few podcasts and things like that, but that's a pretty like just, you and I just chatting or whatever. But I think, we'd love to do some more of this sort of Q&A stuff too, because it's so great to get the feedback back from customers. That's, again, we're not a faceless manufacturer that
Definitely
just
not,
makes something and just puts it out and goes, well, there it is, guys, take it if you want it. It's constantly evolving and changing based on what people actually want to use with it, or a new part of the sport pops up and downwinding gets really big and we realize there's something that we can specialize specific for downwinding. Well, let's do that, and people want it, we'll make it. Sure. So
Josh is gonna be able to like plug the USB-C into his cell phone and just get a 5-second burst from.
Yeah, Mark, that's a really good idea. That's all you need.
Plug your phone.
Because I always bring my phone with me, so just a little boost of
You
energy.
don't even need a battery. You don't need a unit. You just
let me not pass that one.
Go.
To Paul. He'll be like, oh, God, Josh, you don't get it.
drain your cell phone so you can't call for help, and you only get 3 seconds of assist. Good luck, Josh. Have fun.
Love that.
Well,
that's great. Well, I think we can wrap it up, but I want to thank you guys for making the long trek, the 26-hour journey or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Bit of a mess.
Charging through last night and what would be your daytime. And
Constantly
knocking out this video in the middle of your what would be nighttime. So you guys are legends. Thank you
That's
for
a pleasure.
coming down.
Thanks for having us. And
Thanks so much.
excited to keep the relationship going. And
Yeah, exciting. There may be more connections in the near future here, but
100%.
we're 100% stoked on Foil Drive and aim to stock everything. It sells so quickly. Everybody's so amped on it. It's hard to do. You can't hardly even make it fast enough. But we aim to be a place where you can go and get whatever you need for your foil drive system, whether it's A or B or Z.
And we're pushing super hard to get you guys some more gear over here to the US too. Obviously, with summer coming up. We know these things are in hot demand and no one ever likes waiting for toys. So we've got a full team of, 20, 25 people and steadily growing as well to help improve the throughput of our gear too, and to make better resources and have more people around the world to help people understand this gear and look after everyone. So it's a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah, shocking. You guys make them in-house.
Yeah, we make them, handmade them.
Design them in-house.
Yeah.
Ship them to us straight from your factory and in your home base, right? It's all in the same building. That's unreal. There's not a lot of that happening nowadays. And for you guys to do it at that level is shocking.
So the lead times are definitely dropping as we go. We like to leave the lead times on our website higher than what they really are, because we'd rather you get your toy sooner or earlier than you thought.
Just buy it from MACkite. They'll get it in 2 days anyway.
That's it. But just thought I'd drop that in there too, that we are working really hard behind the scenes to try and get more of this stuff out here and to help support you guys, like as a shop, to have more stuff. So
and more exciting things to come. So we'll have more info for you guys as that all develops, and
100%.
more videos to help support your experience on Foil Drive and everything else that we sell. So
get out there and have some fun.
Thanks for everybody dropping in, experiencing our first live stream. We're learning as we go on here, but it's been a lot of fun, and look forward to reposting this later for everybody to take a peek at later. There's a lot of info here, so I'll have to chop it up and get it in digestible bites for everybody that doesn't want to sit through however long this was.
No, thank you, Tucker. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everybody showing up.
See you guys.
Take care.
How'd we go?